I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is TCS Plus, brought to you by TechCentral. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to us on YouTube. The address to use is youtube.com/TechCentral. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and you'll never miss another show from TechCentral. Now, Open Access Data Centers, or OADC for short, is a data center business formed by in the Wiocc Group, and they're making some big investments, not only here in South Africa, but across the continent. I'm very pleased now to welcome Darren Bedford, Group Chief Development Officer at Wiocc Group, to talk about OADC's expansion plans, specifically around a new data center build in Isando, east of Johannesburg. And Darren, you're joined here in the studio today by Wayne Desar, and he's Chief Executive of Cipherwave, and he has moved into this new data center, and they're doing some really interesting things. So we're going to unpack all of that in the discussion today. But Darren, tell me a little bit about Wiocc Group. I think a lot of people know Wiocc as an investor in the original EASY submarine cable on Africa's east coast, but you're much more than that today. Tell me a bit about the history of Wiocc Group, and then how Open Access Data Centers was formed and what your plans are.
Thanks, Duncan. So Wiocc Group was formed to house both wire connectivity and open access data centers as a group company. And that's to facilitate investments in both submarine cables and the data center business. So traditionally, Wiocc is a submarine cable operator and national long-haul provider. And 2 or 3 years ago, we decided that we were going to branch out into data centers, and specifically to land the Equiano cable in Nigeria. So that was our first investment. We secured land in Lekki and Lagos, and we've just finished constructing the cable landing station and full data center in Nigeria.
Okay, and you've invested in the Equiano cable itself, and you've built a number of data centers around the African continent, and you've landed the Equiano cable, if I'm not mistaken, just south of Durban in Amanzimtoti.
That's the Two Africa Gira cable system.
Two Africa
Gira cable system, and that's landed in our new Amanzimtoti data center, which is located about 2 kilometers from the beach.
Right.
And that is now ready for service, and customer hosting will start in a short time.
Fantastic.
The cable will go live probably in Q3 of this year.
Q3. To Africa, not Equiano, my apologies. Now, tell me a bit about what's involved in landing one of these mega cables in a data center. Is it like a traditional data center? I'm imagining there are a lot of interconnects happening inside the building with other telecommunications operators. Just maybe take us through what's actually involved in bringing one of these cables ashore.
So basically it starts with the cable ship, which lands the cable shore landing, and that goes into a beach manhole. And then that's backhauled on the front-haul submarine cable through into the SLTE room, or the CLS room.
Right.
So in the data center, we've got a specific room where it houses the power termination equipment, and that's where the cable ends.
Okay.
And then from there, the cross-connects go through into the SLTE rooms, where all the operators will host the equipment.
So how big is this facility?
The facility is a 5 megawatt facility.
Yeah.
It'll host, when complete, about 500 racks.
Okay.
And that will be linked onto the new NLD 5 and 6 and new fiber rings through to New Germany and back into Durban.
Okay. And now all other telecommunications operators would then have interconnects, I imagine, in that building.
Correct.
To get access to the Two Africa
Correct.
cables
So
onward connectivity.
it's a fully open access data center. So no cost for bringing fibers in. So it's a free and fair, no cross connects.
Open access data center is about a year old now, I believe.
About 2 years old.
Coming up for 2 years. Okay. Tell me a bit about some of the investments it's made in that time.
So our first investment was in Lagos. It's a ultimate design capacity of 20 megawatts. We've deployed just over 2 megawatts at the moment, which is live. Then we have our Amanzimtoti data center, which has landed the Gira cable. We have our new facility in Isando, which is design capacity of 12 megawatts. And then we've just completed Rondebosch in Cape Town.
Okay.
And Brackenfell will be live in April.
Okay. Now you speak about a core-to-edge strategy in open access data centers. What do you mean by that exactly?
So along with the larger data centers, we've also built about 40 edge data centers around South Africa. This is to support a specific customer. And basically it's an aggregation site where we aggregate all the last miles, and then we put it onto our long-haul network back to our core data centers.
Right. So what is an edge data center exactly? What does it look like? What advantages does it bring to customers?
It's similar to a big data center, but just on a smaller scale. So it'll be a traditionally 10 to 50 rack data center. tier 3 design,
Right.
and basically give a little bit more structure and reliability to a smaller town or where we locate these edge data centers.
Right, right. And the advantages it brings to customers, why would you host in an edge data center as opposed to, say, your facility in Isando?
So customers are looking for where they're going to put their local equipment for terminating their metro links and things like that. So that's specifically what those sites are for.
Okay, understood, understood. Now, you've raised quite a bit of money as open access data centers, or Wiocc Group, to invest in open access data centers. Just take us through some of the details there and the fundraisings you've done.
So we've raised over $100 million for investments in our initial phase of data centers, and that covers Nigeria and the investments in South Africa.
Right.
We are planning further expansion into Zambia and Malawi.
Yes.
And our data center in DRC, which is under construction at the moment, will be live sometime in July, August.
Okay. Okay. So lots of investments happening.
Lots.
The Isando facility, to tell us, it's a 12 megawatt facility. Why is Isando so popular for data centers, by the way? There's a lot of them being built there.
One is power. Power is very reliable in Isando.
Is it exempted from load shedding, that area? Does it?
It is exempted from load shedding. It's also where a lot of the activity is happening in terms of where cables terminate, etc. Right. So the other facilities around in the area, so it's key for us to have, it's almost like an Isando campus now.
Yes.
Very similar to Docklands in London.
Yes.
Where we've got quite a few data centers around. So it just gives customers a lot more choice and flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Makes sense if there's no power cuts in that area, and also given the fact that there is so much telecommunications infrastructure in the ground there already. Wayne, you're moving into this data center. Tell us a little bit about Cipherwave, first of all, what it is you guys do, for those who haven't been introduced to the company yet, and then how you came about, how this deal with OADC came about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Duncan. So, we've been in the telecommunication space for about 13 years now, and providing connectivity, voice, cloud services. We had our own data center, which was housed up in Midrand, 220 square meter facility, 80 racks in it. And what we were doing was we got to a point, I guess, like most businesses, where we had to review our data center, and we were going down the journey of ISO certification, and we were evaluating, what was needed to kind of get us to our ISO. And what had happened some 18 months back was we started to look at the impact of load shedding. I mean, running a facility like that, we're managing, our own diesel, storage, as well as maintenance around our UPSs, our generators, our aircon units.
So you weren't exempt from load shedding.
So we were not exempt from load shedding, unfortunately, being in Midrand.
Yeah.
And it is quite taxing, from a business perspective. We then had a look to see, how core our data center was, and whether it was a space that we wanted to play in. Of course, as you know, there's been a vast amount of investment in the data center space over the last 2 to 3 years, and the last 18 months being the most significant, with a lot of new facilities coming online, OADC being one of them. And where the conversation came up from is, I think Cipherwave has been in partnership with Wiocc for well over 10 years.
Okay.
And so there was already an established partnership that was there. Wiocc provide us with all of our IP transit traffic that we have, our NLD capacity that we have, and so we have
national long distance.
National long distance, 100% correct. So we have quite a strategic relationship with Darren and the team.
Right.
Through the process of evaluating what our options were going to be, we then reached out to Darren and we had a chat about what we were looking to do. Currently, Cipherwave's network is spanned across a number of data centers as part of our national footprint. So we sit in the Terraco, Joburg, Cape Town, Durban facilities. In Johannesburg, we sit in Terraco, as I mentioned, but also we sit in Africa data centers, we sit in Hertzner data center, and then we had our own data center. So after sitting down and kind of chatting with Darren, and they advised us what they were looking to do in terms of OADC's footprint, coming into South African shores, we then started to evaluate it a lot more closer. The facilities that they're building are quite impressive. They meet all of the standards, and I think what actually helped the conversation along was the fact that we had such a strong partnership.
Right.
We needed the independence that we currently had at the time, operating our own data center, and a lot of our service assurance comes from having the ability to be nimble ourselves.
Right.
So it was purely around timing. OADC were building the Isando facility. Through that evaluation and what we were able to negotiate around our needs for our data center, the team came to the party and they gave us, the opportunity to create almost a data center within a data center, which I don't think is something that OADC want to easily replicate because of the amount of work you can imagine. And I had a lot of respect for the team. They were building out a data center. And so there was a project for that. And then there was another project alongside of that, which was Cipherwave's data center inside of OADC. And so you have two sets of teams that are busy doing what they need to do. But it was great. We had phenomenal support from the entire OADC team. And we were able to, to complete that project and migrate our data center in a space of 1.5 months.
Wow.
From Midrand to Isando with minimum, impact to our customers. But it wasn't that, it wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have the underlining, networking partnership.
Right.
So we brought that data center online as a POP on the back of our 100 gig backbone. And so it was a lift and shift. And very seamless for customers.
I can imagine physically moving a data center must be one of the most challenging things you could do.
Well, you need to try to think about selecting a data center first. When you see an empty building and somebody's trying to explain to you, picture this is what it's going to look like. And we're saying, Darren, it's not. It simply just won't. And we had a good couple of laughs about it. But I mean, again, it was the partnership. We had to trust that they knew what they were doing. And they do, because they had already showed us, where they had built other facilities, and the team that they had was really good as well.
So what has it meant practically for Cipherwave as a business? What have you been able to do now that you've moved into this data center that perhaps you couldn't do before? I mean, I understand there's probably more reliability now, more uptime, because not necessarily more uptime, because you had backups and that sort of thing. So during load shedding, you would have kept running. But what are some of the practical business advantages you've seen from this move?
Well, for one, I don't have to worry about the diesel bill anymore that I used to pay on a weekly basis to make sure we kept our 4,000 liters, abreast at the old data center. But really, in essence, the benefit for us is, the deal was a very unique deal. Wiocc gave us a dedicated space inside of the OADC Isando facility. Yeah. It is branded Cipherwave.
Okay.
So it is a Cipherwave data center. We took up office facilities in their branded Cipherwave as well. And it was quite important that we had the same capabilities that we were used to at our Midrand data center. And again, as Darren said, it is open access. So we terminated all our own infrastructure. So we put dual 144 core pairs of fiber between OADC and Terraco. And we sit in the Terraco carrier environment as well. So OADC is just a natural extension of the facility and our network that sits at Terraco because of the capacity that's there. But inside of the OADC facility, again, where the OADC team and the Wiocc team came to the table to assist us was giving us that ability and the assistance around terminating our fiber cores in that facility. So the benefits for us is not having to worry about the maintenance largely of the data center. Cipherwave is an internet service provider. We're focused on delivering services to customers. And with our own data center, we had dedicated teams manning the data center, monitoring the BMS systems 24/7. And OADC does that, and now I'm able to, and we're as a business are able to repurpose our teams to focus on customer solutions.
Rather than managing infrastructure.
Exactly. We had to worry about quarterly maintenance on generators, quarterly maintenance on UPSs, and the associated, maintenance costs with that. And so it gave us the peace of mind of focusing on our core you know, part of our business, which was delivering that customer experience, as opposed to, you know, worrying about, you know, the upkeep and uptime of the facility.
It's interesting. Do you think South Africa's energy crisis is actually going to drive companies like Cipherwave and others to go for sort of an outsourced, to have a third party manage their data center infrastructure, just because it has become so difficult and so expensive to keep a data center operating in this environment?
I think a short answer is yes, Duncan, and I think we've seen it to some extent, right? You know, there's a lot of buzzwords that are happening, you know, inside of industry, consolidation being one of those, and sometimes those buzzwords are usually linked to a specific technology. You know, in the connectivity space, we've heard for the last 3 to 5 years about this consolidation that's coming, but I think businesses do need to consistently evaluate what's core to their operating model.
Yeah.
If you're not doing that, you're going to be lumped, you know, sitting with something that you really can't justify the operating costs, and it puts undue pressure on you. So I do think that is happening. I think we would have seen, to some extent, I can't remember if it was American Tower buying out MTN's towers and renting it back to them. So there is you know, that assessment happening inside of all facets of business. But I think the question is, you know, what is core to delivering, you know, that service to your customers? And OADC, as Darren mentioned, are investing heavily in it. From a Cipherwave perspective, one of the big reasons that we looked at rather moving into another facility, and specifically the OADC one, was it's not core to our business. You know, then again, when you look at the amount of competition in the market, and thankfully that's more Darren's task now to deal with than it was mine. You have the Vantage data centers, you've got NTT's data center, you've got Terraco's upgraded and expanded space, you've got ADC space, you've got Hertzner that's there, and we could go on talking about the amount of data center space. That's why Darren is smiling, because he's got a lot of work to do. But I think if that's your business model, and that is kind of, you know, what's core to your business, you can focus your resources and people to delivering. Whereas, you know, for us, it just wasn't. It was a value add that we had to enable our cloud business.
Right.
And that's why, you know, it made sense to move into a bigger facility.
Darren, Wayne's made the point that this is actually a very competitive space, and there's been a lot of investment going on over the last couple of years. Do you think the market is overtraded? And as a sort of follow-on to that, how do data center operators, how does OADC, for example, differentiate itself from the data center operator down the road? In other words, why as a customer would I consider going into, for example, the OADC data center in Isando as opposed to choosing another data center somewhere else?
I think we're positioning it as a cost-effective data center.
Okay.
We want customer focus. Customers are focusing more on their costs these days.
Right.
And we can enable them to reduce their cost and OPEX costs, etc. And we offer value for money on our data centers. Plus, I think we offer a lot of customizations that other data centers don't do. Yeah. I mean, like we offered Wayne, he's got his dedicated space, dedicated office, dedicated access control. And these are things that we can offer which are unique to the market. We also build very quick.
Yeah, this is true.
I think when Wayne and I pulled the trigger and decided that Wayne was going to come in as our anchor customer, we literally had an empty warehouse, and in 46 days, we'd built a tier 3 facility.
46 days? Yeah. How did you do that?
So we started this journey earlier in the year.
It took longer to build the studio,
exactly.
by the way.
So Wayne had a deadline.
Right.
And in the contract, he said if we weren't finished by a specific date, he could go elsewhere. So there was a hard and fast date.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fortunately, we'd ordered all the M&E equipment we had in the warehouse. So we had cooling units and generators and UPSs, etc. So when Wayne pulled the trigger and we started the build, it was literally the team came to site, and it was an impossible task. But you know, we worked, myself and the team were there day and night, Monday to Sunday, and we pulled it off. Yeah. And the facility is amazing.
Absolutely.
I think Wayne's extremely happy.
Exceptionally.
Why did you need to move so quickly?
Duncan, so what had happened was, you know, December is a less disruptive time. You know, businesses usually closed and wind down.
Right.
And the Midrand data center was our primary cloud node. We have some large-scale customers that sits in that facility, and there's never a conducive time.
Right.
So, you know, through our evaluation and through the discussions with Darren, and Darren's very much was very much a part of the conversations when we were talking about what some of our risks are and what some of our challenges were. And when we had made the decision that we are going to move and we selected OADC, and we sat down, it was the best suited time. It wasn't ideal because of the short time frames, and I think, again, you know, to some extent, it wasn't just the scenario of me phoning Darren and saying, you know, if this then that. It was we, you know, Darren and his team actually came through to have a look at our data center, looking at the scale of what we were looking to do, and I think what worked out relatively well, aside from the pressure and the late nights and the calls, you know, and the short timelines, was we had a network. So it was a lift and shift, and the challenge was really exacerbated by the time to deliver, you know, getting equipment, you know, moved in, amidst all of the challenges that we had at the time, you know, getting stuff in through the ports, etc. So OADC had the team. And from the time that we saw the empty warehouse to looking at the plans and discussing it, there was a real question asked, like, is it realistic? And at the end of the day, Duncan, it was the customers. You know, customers. We needed to go back with firm dates, with firm commitments.
And you wanted to do this move over the Christmas period?
It was before the freeze period, actually. Okay. So we needed to be in by the end of November, and we allowed ourselves the first week of December as a soak-in period to allow to test.
Okay.
And I think collectively with the Cipherwave team, I've never seen a bunch of people work so well together against such you know, a short time frame, and coupled with customers. We were realistic, and they had real business concerns. You know, some of our customers are retail customers. December's the most busiest time, and we exposed all of this to Darren and the team. We played open cards. We told them to a large extent what the dependencies were with key customers. It was a partnership. And the customers bought into it because we had to position the why to them as well. After we had gotten Darren to commit to it, as you know, to make sure that we were backed up. So that's largely the reason why was just the most opportune time from a trading perspective, and to try and beat the freeze period, because then all of the network teams go away, and if anything had to happen, we wouldn't have had anybody available. So it was the best time for our team to be able to then go back, and also, whilst everybody's away, start to cross-check and make sure everything, you know, worked before January, when we knew that businesses are going to hit the ground running, you know, and expect productivity levels to be back to normal.
So what exactly is involved in moving? I mean, let's take one of your big retail customers, for example. They're obviously very reliant on their website for business. You've got to move that from Midrand to Isando. How do you actually do that? Do you replicate the server in Isando and then just cut across? How does it work exactly?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So with our cloud services, we had our primary cloud sitting in our Midrand data center, and our secondary sitting in the Terraco data center. Depending on what type of customer the service, what type of service the customer has with us, we had to kind of plot as part of our project plan how we would move the facilities or the services. So the way it worked was we had, where we had customers who had replicated services with us, it was easy enough to switch off on the one side and get them to reconnect to the facilities at the second data center. For the other customers who only had a primary instance with us, it involved us moving that infrastructure. So we had to arrange with the customer a convenient time. All of this was done after hours.
Okay.
So that was the one thing. You know, it had to happen after hours, and there were scheduled windows for when that would happen. So like with anything, you know, there was a dress rehearsal, and by that I mean we had to physically run through shutting down, what that would involve. There's how information would be secured as such. There was a physical dry run of literally unracking, packing, and putting it into, freight vehicles. We had a courier company, in fact, more than one. In some instances, we had to get armored vehicles. We had diverse routes to get to Isando, and we literally had to dry run this.
Armored vehicles because of the sensitivity of the data on those servers.
Yeah. So for to some extent, based on some of our customers, and we've got medical organizations who host in our cloud, and they've got patient data, and so we had to give certain reassurance. And yes, I know it sounds like it would be out of the ordinary, but we did have armored vehicles. That had to transport certain data. And so what we did was through the dry runs, it gave us the ability to actually time the downtime window to the minute that we needed to do it. And so when it came to our scheduled migration days, what we did do for our change controls that we had in place is exactly as I've explained. For customers that required their services to be up, we just moved it across to the secondary facility, and they continued to do what they needed to do.
Sure.
For other customers, or where we were moving some of our primary services, those were seen as maintenance windows to allow us to shut down the equipment in a proper manner, put it into the transportation vehicles, move it across, and then all in all, it took our guys around 45 minutes to be able to, once the servers were put into the rack, to be able to patch up, bring it up, and bring it onto the network. And it was all because what we had done is the minute OADC was live and on the network on a 100 gig backbone, literally all of the IPs remained the same. It was literally a shift in move.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, some of the networking skills you obviously need in that sort of move is pretty advanced.
Absolutely.
Making sure that those IPs remain the same.
Absolutely.
Probably not the easiest thing to do.
It was, to the contrary, it was very easy. We literally moved it as if we were moving it from one room to another.
Right.
Because what we had done is we had deployed in conjunction with the Wiocc team our new Juniper equipment in the new data center and connected it into 100 gig core backbone. So it was already on our network, and our network had already seen OADC just as another node. So when our servers and nodes moved across, it basically just married back on, okay, this looks familiar, and it continued to connect and talk back into the network.
Right. Now, you've spoken about the advantages that this brings you and the fact that it allows you to spend more time with your customers rather than trying to manage a data center through load shedding, et cetera, et cetera. But in the longer term, what does it mean for Cipherwave in terms of your business development? You're obviously going to grow business because you can spend more time with customers and getting new customers as well. But having this base, this data center from which you can now operate, what does it mean for your business growth going forward?
Yeah, so Darren touched it. I think one of the biggest positioning or selling points was having our own data center gave us the ability to manage our input costs and to be able to compete. Our data center was purposely built for our cloud, and we use it as part of our journey to the cloud for customers. And what that means was really just going to customers and saying, why don't we move some of your on-premise stuff into a facility whilst you sweat that asset? And when it came time for them to review that asset and whether they wanted to reinvest into it, we would then talk to them about our cloud. And that would only be possible if we had the ability to control some of the input costs. Again, through our partnership with the OADC team, we had very tense discussions around commercials. We did. But they understood that we needed that flexibility to remain competitive. Okay. And so they gave us that ability. So we sit in a very fortunate position that we are able to still remain competitive from an input costing perspective. The other thing was moving into this data center and building our own infrastructure into it. And I just want to talk about what that means. So inside of that data center, all of the reticulation in that facility inside of the Cipherwave facility is all managed by Cipherwave. So when it lands inside of OADC, it's a Cipherwave technician that's patching the customer through to that meet me room, because with the help of the OADC team, we've pretty much we've reticulated that entire facility ourselves. So that does give us the ability to still impart our own brand experience to our customers that come into that facility. So when you walk into OADC, whilst there is a rest of a data center that's there, when you veer left to the Cipherwave facility, you immediately feel that presence. It's entirely branded Cipherwave. You walk into our boardroom, which is there with the boardroom table, all branded Cipherwave. And so our customers that are there, whilst OADC does have, central customer areas, you can go into our facility. We have our own coffee bar that's there. Your team can work from it. It's at a slightly better temperature than the data center is. but we have all of the comforts of our own. So it gives us the ability to still compete inside of a very competitive data center space. The way we've set up that facility, Duncan, what's important is we could give other smaller ISPs the same experience we have. In the sense that they may have their infrastructure at other facilities, but those input costs might not be something they're able to move. Through the partnership, we're able to do that and pretty much give them the ability to replicate Cipherwave inside of our facility whilst they remain agnostic, have the flexibility to do what they currently do. And naturally, because we also have all of that infrastructure going back to the Terracos and other facilities, we could give them that same ability. And I think a lot of organizations are questioning and are looking and are evaluating in the same manner Cipherwave is, because we know that the market is competitive. Businesses are looking at all aspects of costs, and they're looking at how they can better the input costs.
Darren, you guys built this facility in 46 days, but that does not mean that you cut corners. In fact, the data center is ISO certified. Take us through what that means.
So we're under ISO. We're getting our ISO certification now. It's under process.
All right.
It's designed it's a tier 3 design.
What is a tier 3 design exactly?
It's issued by the Uptime Institute. A specific design for concurrent maintainability of various electrical and mechanical parts of the data center. It just gives customers that extra comfort that everything's been done to a specific standard. And I think that's what it's a key driver for Wayne and other customers coming in is comfortability and know that the light's always on. Basically,
it's not going to fall over.
Exactly. Exactly. Because I think Africa's completely different to the rest of the world. We have lots of challenges. It basically comes around power. And that's what we've got to mitigate. And we've got to make sure it stays on all the time.
In some of the markets that you operate in, like Nigeria, for example, they're well known for having power shortages for many years. How do you keep those data centers operating through these long periods of power outages? Is it just diesel burning? Are you able to take advantage of renewable energy sources?
So Nigeria at the moment, the grid is very unreliable, probably 30% availability at our location. So we're basically running generators 24/7.
Wow.
So the diesel bill is eye-wateringly large.
Yes.
Okay, so yes, we are looking at sustainability solutions at the moment. We have got a 2-hectare plot adjacent to our site in Nigeria. So there's a lot of projects underway. We're looking at renewables in South Africa as well to supply our existing sites. So it's a lot of work, but it's needed, and it's what's necessary.
Yeah. Can you feasibly though take a data center off the grid and run it entirely on solar power? Because I imagine
it's difficult.
At night it's problematic.
It is.
You're going to need massive batteries.
That's the problem. And the cost, the capex cost associated to that, huge. And your returns. Yeah. That's what the issue is.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Interesting. Before we wrap, Darren, last question for you. Just wanted to perhaps get a view on OADC's investment plans going forward. What's next for the company? What's on the roadmap?
So we've got the phase 2 expansion in Nigeria. That's quite a heavy capex item for us.
Right.
It'll be another 12 megawatts additional for that site. The first phase is almost completely sold out. Then we've got DRC, which is coming online in August, and then there'll be a second phase to that.
That must have even more power challenges.
It's actually a bit better because they've got a lot of hydro there. So power's not as big an issue in DRC, neither in Malawi. And then we're looking at countries like Zambia, Malawi, things like that, southern DRC. Wherever our customers' demand is where we'll go.
Yeah.
We don't just want to build a site and hope for the best that's going to fill up.
Yeah.
You know, we want to build something that's, you know, got an anchor customer and it's got a long-term plan and view to it.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about some of these markets that I think perhaps are not often addressed in the ICT equation anyway.
Sure.
A lot of the data center investments happened here in South Africa, particularly here in Joburg, Nigeria and Kenya. You don't often hear about DRC in the context of a data center, but what are some of the opportunities in the smaller markets around Africa for OADC?
I think the issue in the smaller markets has been cost of connectivity. So the growth of the internet in those markets has been pretty small.
Okay.
Now with all the investments and new submarine cables going live and cables that are open access, you know, DRC is going to see an explosion of capacity.
And these are big markets.
These are massive
DRC's
markets,
got what,
big
80,
countries as well.
90 million people?
But it's a vast country, you know, to cover.
Yeah. Jungle.
Yes, it is. And then Zambia, Malawi, they're up and coming markets now. You know, we've seen capacity go from STM1s, STM4s, now 10s, and now we're delivering 100 gigs now into those markets.
Interesting.
So the markets are growing rapidly now. And, you know, they're not going to be thousands of rack data centers. They're going to be 100 to 200 rack data centers to start initially. But that's sort of the core market we're going to address there.
Fascinating conversation, guys, but I think we're going to have to leave it there. Darren Bedford is Chief Development Officer at Wiocc Group, and Wayne Dessau, of course, is CEO of Cipherwave. Thank you so much for sharing these great insights with us today.
Great
Thank you.
chatting to you.
Thanks, Duncan.